Do you remember those bold fashion fads? The ones only 80s teens could truly claim as their own? For a generation, these styles weren't just clothes. They were how teens showed off, fit in, and felt alive in the moment. But looking back now, why do they feel like something we'll never get back? Acid wash jeans were one of the most unmistakable sights of the 1980s, and every teen seemed to have a pair in their closet. It did not matter if they were skin-tight or baggy enough to swallow your sneakers, because the unique bleached pattern screamed rebellion, individuality, and style all at once. Many of these jeans were created by literally washing denim with chlorine and stones, which gave them the cloudy, mottled look that could not be replicated by anything else at the time. Some kids begged their parents for the store-bought pairs, while others risked the wrath of mom and dad by bleaching their own in the bathtub, leaving the whole house smelling like a swimming pool. What made acid wash so memorable was not just the visual, it was the way they symbolized the era's love of extremes, from music to movies to fashion. When you slipped into acid wash jeans, you felt like you were part of the larger pop culture explosion that defined the decade. Teens wore them to malls, to arcades, to concerts, and even to school dances, pairing them with oversized shirts or cropped tops to complete the look. Whether you were into heavy metal, pop, or skateboarding, acid wash jeans fit right in and became the canvas for countless unforgettable memories. Members-only jackets were the ultimate status symbol of cool in the 1980s, and if you had one, you made sure everyone knew it. These jackets, with their lightweight zip-up design and signature epaulets on the shoulders, looked simple at first glance, but they carried an aura of exclusivity that made them irresistible to teens. The company's famous tagline, "When you put it on, something happens," was not just advertising fluff. Kids genuinely believed slipping into one gave them instant charisma. The fit was sleek, slightly snug, and perfect for wearing over a polo shirt or graphic tee, which only added to its versatility. In high schools across the country, members-only jackets were flaunted in hallways, at football games, and even at roller rinks, where the glossy sheen of the material reflected the neon lights. Celebrities wore them on television, making the look even more desirable, and teens saved allowance money or begged parents until they could claim one of their own. What made them special was not just the design, but the way they made average kids feel like rock stars or action heroes. To this day, seeing one instantly transports people back to a time when the right jacket could define your entire reputation. Big hair ruled the 1980s, and teens sprayed entire cans of hairspray just to keep their bangs or curls towering toward the sky. Walking into a high school back then often meant being greeted by a cloud of Aquanet so thick it could rival any fog machine at a rock concert. Girls teased their hair into massive shapes that looked like they defied gravity, while guys tried mullets, spikes, or moosed waves to keep up with the craze. It was not just about looking stylish. It was about taking up space, making an entrance, and showing off personality through hair height. Many teens spent hours in front of bathroom mirrors, brushing, crimping, curling, and spraying until they were satisfied that their hair could survive a windstorm. The style was as much a competition as it was a trend, because whoever had the tallest bangs or biggest perm often stole the spotlight at school dances and Friday night hangouts. Sure, the stiff layers left your hair crunchy to the touch, and sometimes the spray glued it so hard it barely moved. But that was part of the charm. Big hair was the perfect reflection of an era obsessed with boldness, confidence, and living life loud. Fingerless lace gloves were another must-have accessory, and thanks to Madonna, they became a staple for countless teen girls. The gloves were delicate, often black or white, and they added just enough edge to make any outfit feel rebellious. Teens wore them to school with denim skirts, at concerts with fishnet tights, and even with prom dresses for those who wanted to stand out. What made them so unforgettable was the way they balanced elegance and defiance, transforming lace, once considered dainty, into a symbol of youth rebellion. Girls who wanted to channel Madonna's "Like a Virgin" vibe copied her look exactly, often pairing the gloves with layered necklaces, rubber bracelets, and teased hair. Wearing them made you feel like you were part of the music video world you saw every day on MTV, even if you were just walking through your local mall. They were also affordable enough for almost anyone to pick up at department stores, meaning they spread quickly among teens of all social groups. Fingerless lace gloves might have been flimsy and impractical, but their cultural impact was anything but. They turned fashion into self-expression in a way teens had never experienced before. Parachute pants were the flashy, baggy nylon trousers that squeaked when you walked, and for a brief moment, they made every teen feel like a superstar. These pants, made famous by breakdancers and hip-hop artists, were designed with endless zippers, shiny material, and exaggeratedly wide legs that narrowed at the ankle. Teens wore them to school dances, malls, and block parties, proudly showing off their best dance moves in clothes that looked like they belonged on a futuristic stage. The appeal came from their association with the booming hip-hop and breakdancing culture of the 1980s, which turned suburban living rooms into dance floors. Some parents thought the pants looked ridiculous, but to teens, they represented rebellion, rhythm, and the chance to stand out in any crowd. They were also surprisingly comfortable, making them just as popular for lounging as they were for showing off spins and freezes. Of course, they could be noisy, unbreathable, and not exactly flattering on every body type. But no one cared as long as they looked like they belonged in a music video. Parachute pants might have faded quickly, but their memory lives on as one of the boldest and most iconic fashion statements of the decade. Swatch watches were more than just timepieces. They were fashion statements that let teens showcase their personalities right on their wrists. Made in Switzerland, these colorful plastic watches came in endless designs, from neon stripes to funky patterns that screamed 1980s energy. What really set them apart was how teens wore them. Not just one, but sometimes stacked 5 or 6 deep on each arm to show off their collection. At school cafeterias, kids compared patterns like trading cards, proudly flaunting the rarest or wildest designs they could find. They were also affordable enough for many families, which meant you did not have to be rich to join the trend. Teens loved that they could match their swatch to their outfit, mood, or even the season, creating a constant cycle of self-expression. For many, it was their first introduction to the idea that accessories could be just as important as the clothes themselves. Looking back, Swatch watches were a perfect blend of fun, practicality, and identity. A small but unforgettable piece of 80s culture strapped to every teen's wrist. Leg warmers were originally meant for dancers to keep muscles from cramping, but after the movie Flashdance hit theaters, they exploded into mainstream teen fashion. Suddenly, every mall in America had racks of colorful, fuzzy tubes that could be pulled over leggings or jeans. Teens wore them scrunched at the ankle, pulled to the knee, or layered with tights, turning them into versatile accessories that worked for school, aerobics class, or just hanging out. Their appeal was not only about fashion, it was about feeling energetic, athletic, and trendy all at once. Even kids who had never stepped foot in a dance studio wanted to look like they had, and leg warmers offered that instant vibe. They came in every color imaginable, from neon pinks to cool blues, and sometimes even glittery versions for the boldest of teens. Some parents rolled their eyes at the fad, wondering why anyone needed extra fabric around their legs, but teens were too busy rocking them to care. Leg warmers transformed from a dancer's tool into one of the defining fashion quirks of the decade. Ray-Ban Wayfarers became an instant teen obsession in the 1980s, thanks to their bold design and the way Hollywood stars flaunted them on screen. After Tom Cruise slid across the floor wearing them in Risky Business, demand skyrocketed, and teens everywhere wanted to copy the look. The thick black frames were simple but stylish, and they quickly became associated with confidence, coolness, and independence. MTV played a huge role too, with countless music videos featuring stars hiding behind those unmistakable shades. Wayfarers were expensive compared to other sunglasses, which only made them more desirable, as teens saved allowance or worked extra shifts to afford a pair. Wearing them felt like joining an elite club, one that instantly gave you swagger whether you were at the beach, the mall, or just hanging out in the school parking lot. They also went with virtually any outfit, which made them practical despite the high price tag. Even now, Wayfarers remain in style, but for teens of the 1980s, they were more than sunglasses. They were a rite of passage. Jelly shoes were the sparkly plastic footwear that looked cute on the outside, but left many kids with blisters after a long summer day. Despite the discomfort, they were insanely popular thanks to their affordability and the fact that they came in every color under the sun. Some pairs even had glitter embedded in the plastic, making them shimmer in the sunlight and perfect for showing off at school or the playground. Girls often collected multiple pairs, swapping them out to match their outfits or simply because the shoes were so cheap and easy to find. They were waterproof too, which made them convenient for poolside hangouts and beach trips, even if they squeaked with every step. Parents loved the low price, and kids loved the way they made their feet sparkle. It was the perfect storm for a fad. Even though jelly shoes often cracked or left painful marks, teens wore them proudly because they were part of the fun, carefree spirit of the 80s. Today, spotting a pair instantly brings back memories of long summers, neon fashion, and the thrill of chasing style even when it hurt a little. Denim jackets covered in pins and patches were like wearable diaries for teens, turning a simple piece of clothing into a billboard of personality. Kids hunted down band patches, funny slogans, or peace signs to iron or sew onto the back and sleeves, while covering the front with dozens of pins. Every jacket was unique, reflecting the wearer's music tastes, political views, or just a sense of humor that begged to be shared. Walking into a high school in the 1980s often meant being greeted by a sea of denim, each jacket telling its own story. Teens spent weekends at flea markets or concerts hunting for the perfect new patch, proudly adding it to their growing collection. For many, the jacket became their most prized possession, worn year after year until it was faded and frayed. Parents sometimes complained that the heavy jackets looked messy or rebellious, but for teens, they were symbols of independence and self-expression. Denim jackets with pins and patches were more than fashion. They were declarations of identity in a decade that celebrated individuality louder than ever. Mini skirts with tights were the ultimate symbol of 80s teen rebellion, and you could not set foot in a mall without seeing dozens of girls rocking the look. The skirts were short, bold, and usually paired with brightly colored tights that made every step feel like a statement. Sometimes the tights were neon, sometimes patterned, but they always added a playful punch to the outfit. For many teens, this was the perfect blend of daring and practicality. You could wear a mini skirt without freezing in the colder months. At the roller rink, the layered look caught the flashing lights, making kids feel like they had stepped into a music video. Parents often frowned, saying the skirts were too short or too loud, but that only made teens love them more. What made the style stick was how easy it was to customize. You could pair it with oversized sweaters, crop tops, or even a blazer with shoulder pads depending on your mood. Mini skirts with tights were more than just a fad. They represented the confidence, color, and energy that defined a whole generation of teens. High-top Reebok sneakers, especially the iconic white aerobic style, were a unisex staple that every teen wanted in their closet. These sneakers were sleek, supportive, and perfectly in line with the fitness craze that swept through the 80s. You saw them in aerobics videos, on basketball courts, and walking down every high school hallway. Girls paired them with leggings and oversized sweatshirts, while guys wore them with jeans or shorts for a clean, athletic look. The Velcro straps added a futuristic vibe that set them apart from other sneakers on the market. Teens loved how versatile they were. You could wear them to gym class, then straight to the mall without missing a beat. Owning a pair meant you were in step with pop culture, from Jane Fonda's workout tapes to hip-hop dancers performing on sidewalks. White Reeboks may have scuffed easily, but every mark told the story of endless adventures, practices, and nights out. They were not just sneakers. They were part of the uniform of being an 80s teen. Hypercolor t-shirts were pure magic to 80s teens, and for a little while, they felt like the future of fashion. These shirts changed color when you touched them, thanks to special heat-reactive fabric that made every interaction visible. Place your hand on someone's shoulder, and a handprint appeared like a neon signature. At first, it was thrilling. Kids compared color changes between classes, laughed at unintentional sweat marks, and showed off their living shirts at the arcade. The fad spread fast, with teens saving allowance money just to snag one of the pricey pieces. But the novelty came with problems. The shirts faded quickly after too many washes, and sometimes they betrayed embarrassing heat spots no one wanted displayed. Still, for those who owned one, it was like walking around in a science experiment that doubled as a fashion statement. Hypercolor t-shirts might not have lasted long, but in their moment, they captured the playful, experimental spirit of the decade perfectly. Puffy neon jackets were the winter equivalent of a spotlight, and every teen who owned one felt impossible to miss. These coats were oversized, quilted, and stuffed with enough padding to make you feel invincible against the cold. What made them stand out was the neon palette: hot pink, lime green, blazing orange, that glowed even on the dreariest of days. On ski slopes, at bus stops, or walking through the mall, they were like wearable highlighters. Teens loved how the jackets screamed fun and energy, turning a gray winter afternoon into something vibrant. The bulk sometimes made you look twice your actual size, but no one cared when you were wrapped in that much color. Many jackets had bold logos splashed across the back, letting everyone know which brand you had managed to score. Parents appreciated the warmth and visibility, while teens embraced the trend for the statement it made. Puffy neon jackets were oversized in every sense: loud, cozy, and unforgettable. Banana clips were the secret weapon behind many iconic 80s hairstyles, and they were everywhere. These giant comb-like accessories snapped around your hair, instantly giving volume and length. Suddenly, your ponytail looked fuller, your curls looked bouncier, and your overall style felt more dramatic. Girls wore them to school, to aerobics class, and even to formal dances, choosing from endless colors and patterns to match their outfits. The banana clip made big hair even bigger without endless teasing or gallons of hairspray. It was affordable, easy to use, and could transform a look in seconds, which made it irresistible. Sure, sometimes the clip snagged or broke, but the effect was worth it. For many teens, banana clips were the accessory that turned an ordinary morning into a chance to feel glamorous. They embodied the decade's obsession with hair that was bold, visible, and unapologetically fun. Slouch socks in layers became one of the most recognizable looks of the 80s, and no teen wardrobe felt complete without them. These thick socks were worn doubled or even tripled, pushed down around the ankle in bulky folds. The trend took off in aerobics classes and school gyms, where the extra fabric made even the most ordinary sneakers look fashionable. Kids loved the idea that something as simple as socks could turn into a bold fashion statement. Paired with leggings, high-top sneakers, or mini-skirts, they added texture and personality to any outfit. The more layers you wore, the cooler you looked, or at least that was the belief at the time. Teens mixed colors for bold combinations, often matching their socks to scrunchies or t-shirts. At pep rallies, the gym floor looked like a rainbow of socks bouncing to the beat of the marching band. Parents wondered why kids needed to wear 3 pairs of socks at once, but for teens, it was about standing out and being part of the trend. The style was impractical, warm, and sometimes even uncomfortable, but no one cared when fashion was on the line. Slouch socks in layers were silly and excessive, but that is exactly why they became unforgettable. Varsity jackets carried the weight of teenage dreams, and owning one or even borrowing one was a badge of honor. These jackets, usually wool with leather sleeves, represented school pride, athletic achievement, and social status all in one package. For athletes, it was the reward for endless practices and victories. For everyone else, wearing one meant you were connected to someone who mattered. It was not just about warmth, it was about identity, about wearing your school spirit on your shoulders for everyone to see. Teens would proudly stitch patches, pins, and embroidery onto the fabric, making each jacket unique. Girls often wore their boyfriend's jacket, swimming in its oversized warmth and displaying it proudly in hallways. The colors and patches told stories of championships, mascots, and school rivalries, turning the jacket into more than just clothing. Even kids who never set foot on a football field or basketball court admired the look, saving money to buy replicas. Varsity jackets became so tied to teen culture that they appeared in countless movies, cementing their role as symbols of high school life. To put one on was to step into a role bigger than yourself, a little taste of glory. Skinny ties were the punk meets preppy accessory that dominated teen fashion in the 80s. Made from thin strips of fabric, often in black or bold patterns, they paired perfectly with dress shirts and blazers. Unlike the wide ties of earlier decades, skinny ties felt edgy, modern, and rebellious. They popped up in music videos, worn by pop stars and punk rockers who made them feel dangerous, yet refined at the same time. Teens who copied the look felt like they were straddling two worlds, the classroom and the nightclub. Teens wore them to concerts, school dances, or even just hanging out at the mall, using them to show that they cared about style but were not afraid to bend the rules. Pop stars and punk bands helped skyrocket their popularity, giving the tie an image that was both sharp and cool. They could be formal enough for prom, yet casual enough for a night out, which made them incredibly versatile. Some parents thought the trend looked odd or unfinished, but to teens, it was the perfect balance of sophistication and defiance. Skinny ties may have been simple, but they packed a punch that left an impression. Shoulder pads invaded every part of 80s fashion, and even teen blazers and sweaters were not safe from the trend. The pads created exaggerated squared-off silhouettes that made even the skinniest teen look powerful. Inspired by professional styles seen in magazines and television, shoulder pads trickled down into everyday outfits, transforming casual clothes into bold statements. For many teens, it was their first taste of dressing like an adult, imagining themselves as future executives or stars walking red carpets. The pads gave structure to outfits that otherwise would have looked slouchy or shapeless, adding instant drama. Teens wore them to school, to the movies, or to parties, layering oversized blazers with jeans or skirts. The look was part fashion, part fantasy. Teens imagined themselves as confident adults in control of the world. Sometimes the pads were so big they made it hard to move naturally, but that was almost part of the fun. The bulkiness turned heads, made photos memorable, and added to the larger-than-life energy of the decade. Shoulder pads were not subtle, and that was the point. They reflected a time when fashion demanded attention. Chunky plastic earrings were the neon exclamation points of teen fashion, swinging from ears in oversized hoops and bold shapes. They came in hot pinks, electric blues, and lime greens, often sold in sets with matching scrunchies or bangles. Girls wore them to the mall, to roller rinks, and to school dances, where the earrings glowed under flashing lights. The bigger they were, the more they seemed to embody the fearless excess of the decade, daring anyone not to notice. Some kids even coordinated them with jelly bracelets and plastic bangles, stacking color on color. The larger and brighter they were, the better. They were not accessories, they were statements. Teens loved how cheap and accessible they were, collecting dozens of pairs to mix and match with outfits. Even if they sometimes pinched or felt heavy, kids wore them proudly because they completed the look. The earrings were playful, over the top, and perfectly in tune with the maximalist spirit of the 80s. Looking back, they might seem garish, but for teens of the time, they were a simple way to feel bold, colorful, and part of something bigger. Stirrup pants were one of those uniquely 80s inventions that seemed both practical and strange at the same time. They were stretchy leggings with little straps that hooked under your feet, designed to keep the fabric taut and wrinkle-free. For teens, though, stirrup pants became a fashion staple, not just for function, but for how sleek they made your legs look. Girls wore them with oversized sweaters that draped dramatically past the hips, or with baggy sweatshirts tucked just so, creating a silhouette that screamed casual cool. The look spread like wildfire in malls and schools because stirrup pants could be dressed up with flats or dressed down with sneakers. They worked equally well with slouch socks or leg warmers, which made them a natural match for the decade's layering obsession. Part of their charm was comfort. You could move easily, lounge in them all day, and still feel stylish enough for a night out. The hooked strap did not always feel great after hours of wear, and sometimes the pants sagged awkwardly if the elastic stretched out. Still, the trend was unstoppable, especially because fitness and aerobics culture had made stretchy clothes mainstream. Teens wore them to dance classes, to the mall, and even to holiday gatherings, proving they were versatile beyond their sporty roots. Today, stirrup pants might raise eyebrows, but in their prime, they were a beloved uniform of 80s teen life. Corduroy everything was the rallying cry of the 80s, when the ribbed fabric found its way into closets in more forms than anyone thought possible. Pants were the obvious starting point, with teens rocking them in earthy browns, deep burgundies, and classic navy. But the craze did not stop there. Jackets, skirts, vests, and even backpacks got the corduroy treatment, turning a once utilitarian fabric into a full-blown fashion fad. The texture made outfits look cozy and academic, which fit perfectly with the preppy aesthetic that dominated many high schools at the time. Kids wore corduroy blazers over button-down shirts, giving themselves an instant air of sophistication, even if they were just heading to homeroom. Others preferred baggy corduroy pants that swished as they walked, pairing them with sneakers or loafers for a laid-back vibe. The fabric's durability meant these clothes lasted, and parents appreciated not having to replace them constantly. Still, teens embraced corduroy less for practicality and more for the way it looked and felt, slightly retro, slightly rebellious, and undeniably tactile. In a world full of neon synthetics, corduroy brought a soft contrast, reminding everyone that comfort could still be cool. Even today, those ribbed lines instantly transport people back to the hallways and classrooms of the 80s. Painter's pants were the white, pocket-filled trousers that seemed to appear on every teen, even if they had never touched a paintbrush in their life. Originally designed for actual work, complete with loops for brushes and extra pouches for tools, they were adopted as a casual fashion statement. Teens loved the crisp look of white against colorful tops, and the endless pockets felt modern and functional. They became popular among skaters, musicians, and even preppy kids who just wanted something different from jeans. Some wore them spotless, carefully keeping them clean to highlight the bright, minimalist style. Others embraced the scuffs, stains, and wear, treating them as proof of authenticity, even if the only paint they had encountered was in art class. The pants symbolized freedom from strict dress codes, offering both practicality and rebellion in one package. In malls, they stood out against the sea of denim, and in magazines, they were featured alongside sneakers and graphic tees as a must-have for the season. Parents often questioned why kids were spending money on work pants, but teens saw them as a canvas for personal expression. Painter's pants reflected the decade's fascination with turning ordinary functional items into statements of individuality. They were not about painting. They were about painting an image of yourself. Rat-tail haircuts were one of the most divisive fashion choices of the 80s, and yet they spread like wildfire among adventurous teens. The style was simple. Keep the hair short all around, but leave one thin strip or braid growing long at the nape of the neck. Sometimes it was left plain, sometimes tied with a rubber band, and sometimes even braided with beads or wrapped in colored thread. It was a strange combination of clean-cut and rebellious, which is probably why so many teens embraced it. Rat tails appeared in high school yearbooks, at roller rinks, and even in family photos where parents clearly disapproved. For kids, though, the haircut was a badge of independence. It said you were willing to stand out, even if people laughed. Some teens paired it with spiky hair or mullets, doubling down on the decade's love of daring styles. The rat tail might have looked odd, but it gave you something to play with, twirl, or even swap stories about with friends who also had them. Teachers frowned, parents groaned, but peers respected the commitment it took to grow one out. Looking back, rat tails feel like one of the strangest trends of the decade, but for those who wore them, they were pure confidence. Bolo ties were the unexpected Southwestern accessory that somehow made their way into high school hallways across the country. Traditionally worn with Western suits or cowboy attire, these braided cords with decorative clasps suddenly became teen fashion in the 80s. You would see them paired with button-down shirts, skinny jeans, and even blazers, creating a look that blended country roots with modern flair. The clasps often featured turquoise, silver, or bold geometric designs, giving each bolo tie a personalized feel. For some kids, it was a way to stand out from the sea of standard neckties, offering a dash of individuality with every outfit. Others loved the connection to music and pop culture, since bolo ties popped up on television and in music videos. They were easy to wear, easy to adjust, and affordable compared to formal accessories, which made them accessible to teens everywhere. In school dances, they became a playful alternative to stiff bow ties, letting kids look stylish without losing comfort. Even though the trend faded, bolo ties remain a quirky reminder of how far 80s teens were willing to go to experiment with fashion. They took something regional and turned it into a nationwide fad, proving once again that no style was too niche for the decade's fearless spirit. Now imagine being a kid in the 1980s. You see a commercial where a kid is floating through the air like they are on the moon. Enter moon shoes, mini trampolines for your feet. A miracle of plastic, rubber bands, and hope. The packaging promised anti-gravity fun. But what you got was 2 slabs of plastic that shook your ankles into submission. You strapped them onto your sneakers, took a few hopeful jumps, and within 5 minutes, you were sitting on the ground nursing a bruised shin. They were supposed to be fun. Instead, they became an unofficial rite of passage for backyard injuries. Sure, you might get one satisfying bounce in before the strap snapped off or your foot twisted sideways like it had a mind of its own. But that did not stop kids from begging for them. We were promised space adventures. We got orthopedic bills. Still, for one fleeting second, you felt like an astronaut. And then you remembered you were just in the driveway, stuck in a pair of squeaky plastic traps. But if your feet were not being tortured, chances are your telephone was, because the next trend had a serious case of over-accessorizing. Step into any kitchen from the 1970s, and you will be greeted by 2 colors that defined a generation: avocado green and harvest gold. These colors were not just trendy. They were a movement, a rebellion against the sterile whites and grays of the previous decades. But when they first hit the market, people were not so sure. Who wanted a fridge the color of guacamole, or a stove that looked like it belonged in a barn? Critics called them loud, tacky, and too bold for the kitchen. But that was the point. They brought warmth, personality, a strange sort of comfort that made every meal feel like it came from a place of love, not a machine. It was less about design and more about feeling. Avocado green reminded people of nature. Harvest gold hinted at sunshine and homegrown meals. Eventually, the world caught on. These colors invaded everything: blenders, dishwashers, even phone cords. They became the standard, not the outlier. And while later decades would mock them endlessly, those who lived through it remember how alive those kitchens felt, how human, how cozy. Because sometimes, color is more than just color, it is a memory. The Teasmade was not just a novelty. It was a revolution in how mornings began. A combination alarm clock and tea maker, it became a fixture in British bedrooms and a curious but beloved import in mid-century American homes. Imagine waking to the gentle hiss of boiling water, the soft clink of porcelain, and the smell of fresh brewed tea wafting through the air before your feet ever touched the floor. The Teasmade delivered this magic through simple but elegant engineering. A timer triggered the kettle. A mechanical arm poured the boiling water into a waiting teacup. No fumbling in the kitchen, no slamming drawers, just warmth and calm. Some models even included a gentle nightlight, glowing softly on your bedside table like a companion. It turned mornings into rituals. But rituals are easy to break. Coffee took over. Digital clocks became the norm. And the quiet grace of the Teasmade was forgotten. Now it exists mostly in memories and dusty attics. But for those who used one, the association is immediate. Peace, intention. A morning that cared for you instead of demanded something from you. When did we trade thoughtful awakenings for jarring alarms and paper cups? Acid wash jeans were loud before you even opened your mouth. With their blotchy patterns and faded splotches, they looked like someone had taken a bleach bottle to denim, and somehow, that became cool. These jeans were rebellious, messy, and unmistakably 1980s. Everyone had a pair. Some wore them tight-rolled at the ankle, others let them drape over high-top sneakers. Acid wash showed up in jackets, skirts, and full matching sets that turned entire outfits into walking eye strain. You could not blend in wearing acid wash. You stood out, and that was the point. It was denim with attitude. Rough, bold, a little chaotic. Parents hated it. Teachers rolled their eyes. But teens embraced the weirdness. It felt edgy, like you were wearing the uniform of a generation that refused to dress quietly. Old photographs now show groups of kids lined up in front of lockers, each one looking like they had just emerged from a bleach accident and loving it. Acid wash was not timeless, it was not flattering, but it was unforgettable. And in a decade known for excess, it fit right in. Even now, pulling on an old pair brings back the noise, the neon, and the thrill of breaking the fashion rules. Let us be real. Shoulder pads were not just a fashion statement. They were a fashion exclamation. And somehow they trickled down from business suits and power blazers to teenagers. Yes, nothing says youthful rebellion quite like looking like you are gearing up for a scrimmage with the Chicago Bears. In the 1980s, you could barely pick up a sweater or jacket without finding a pair of foam triangles stuffed into the lining. For adults, it was about power dressing. For teens, it was just confusing. You would throw on your favorite sweatshirt and suddenly look like a linebacker on picture day. They made you look older, broader, and weirdly more square. Removing them was a gamble. They were usually sewn in with all the stubbornness of a century-old family secret. But for a while, they were everywhere. Dances, school photos, family reunions. Looking back, it is hard to say what the appeal really was. Maybe we all wanted to look like business executives trapped in high school. But if shoulder pads were trying to make kids look powerful, the next musical invention went even further. It said, let us wear our entire keyboard as a guitar. Let us talk about the rise and rapid fall of the keytar. One photograph changed everything: a red swimsuit, a dazzling smile, and a cascade of golden feathered hair that seemed to defy gravity and define an era. Farrah Fawcett's hair was not just a hairstyle, it was a cultural shift. At first, people thought it was too big, too styled, too much. But they stared. They clipped the photo. They brought it into salons like it was sacred scripture. Suddenly, every woman wanted that hair, and every man noticed it. It was soft but powerful, controlled chaos. It flipped and flowed like waves caught in the wind. It made regular hair look flat and forgotten. And the beauty of it? You did not have to be Farrah to wear it. You just had to have a blow dryer, a round brush, and the patience of a saint. Because those layers, that volume, it took work. But it was worth it. Girls stood in their bathrooms for hours trying to master the flip. Mothers tried it. Daughters perfected it. Even dolls and mannequins started showing up with the iconic cut. What once felt extravagant became the new standard. It was more than a look. It was a feeling. A kind of glamorous rebellion that said, yes, I'm allowed to take up space. Farrah gave the 1970s something beautiful to believe in, and her hair led the way. The bread box was once as essential to the kitchen as the sink or the stove. A humble wooden or metal container, usually perched at the back of the counter, it kept loaves fresh in the days before plastic bags and preservatives took over. Its job was simple: slow down staleness and keep out pests. But its presence meant more than that. It meant you baked or bought bread regularly, that someone in the house cared about toast, sandwiches, or buttered slices to go with stew. Opening the lid released the faintest scent of yeast and crust. For kids, it was the treasure chest of after-school snacks. For adults, it was a silent reminder that home meant warmth. The sound of the lid closing, soft, final, was part of the rhythm of daily life. Bread boxes came in colors to match tiled kitchens and Formica counters. They had floral decals, chrome handles, and rounded corners that looked almost cheerful. Over time, though, as preservatives lengthened shelf lives and bread became an afterthought, the box disappeared. Modern kitchens left no room for something so quaint. But in losing it, we lost a ritual. A quiet pause in the day. When did bread stop deserving a place of its own? Boombox battles turned sidewalks into stages and backpacks into speaker cabinets. In the 1980s, carrying a massive boombox on your shoulder was more than a way to listen to music. It was a declaration. You had style, you had taste, and you had batteries heavy enough to power a small city block. These machines blasted everything from hip-hop to hair metal, and they did not ask for permission. You walked down the street with your soundtrack trailing behind you, volume all the way up, head nodding to the beat. Some kids parked them at basketball courts. Others lined them up outside corner stores. Whoever had the best bass usually won the crowd. Tapes were traded, dials were turned, and sometimes spontaneous dance-offs broke out right there on the pavement. Boomboxes were heavy, awkward, and impossible to ignore. But in a time before smartphones and Bluetooth, they were portable pride. They made noise. They made statements. And if you saw someone approach with a fresh cassette in hand and a boombox on their shoulder, you knew something good was about to happen. Boombox battles were not just about the music. They were about being seen, heard, and remembered. You sat in a folding chair, you stared ahead, and then the photographer said, "Say cheese," while lasers exploded behind you. That is right. We are talking about laser backgrounds in school photos. For some reason, every kid in the 1980s decided the best way to capture the innocence of youth was to be immortalized against a backdrop that looked like a Star Trek rave. Bright blue and hot pink lasers crisscrossed behind you like you were dodging security beams in a heist movie. You could be wearing a Mickey Mouse sweatshirt, and the background would make you look like you were breaking into NASA. It was peak 1980s over-the-topness. Loud, flashy, and totally unnecessary. But somehow every kid wanted it. It was the photo choice that said, "I am ready for the future." And also recess. Parents either loved it or groaned at it. And looking back now, it is a nostalgic masterpiece of absurdity. Sure, it aged poorly, but there is something kind of wonderful about a generation that thought lasers made everything better. That includes the next wild invention too. Tiny wrist gadgets that promised futuristic fun but usually conked out before lunchtime. They were tight. They were shiny. They looked like you had been shrink-wrapped in liquid metal. Disco pants were not made for comfort. They were made for movement. But before they became the uniform of every dance floor in America, they were met with raised eyebrows and uncomfortable fidgeting. Spandex blends were still new. People did not know what to make of fabric that hugged every curve and shimmered under strobe lights. But when disco fever swept through the 1970s, something changed. People wanted to shine, to spin, to sweat and sparkle under a mirror ball without losing a drop of flair. Disco pants did that. They turned your legs into disco balls. They caught every flash of light and reflected it like you were part of the show. And the more people danced in them, the more others wanted a pair. Even those who doubted it at first. It was not about modesty. It was about motion. About stepping into a world where glamour and groove collided. You did not just wear disco pants. You became part of the night. And for one moment, every person in the room was watching you. That is a kind of magic you do not forget. Jelly shoes were like candy for your feet. Glittery, colorful, and see-through, they looked like something out of a candy store window. You could get them in bubblegum pink, lemon yellow, clear with glitter, or even lavender sparkle. They were cheap, they were cute, and if you were a kid in the 1980s, you had to have a pair. But once you wore them for more than 10 minutes, that is when the nightmare started. These things had no ventilation. Your feet would sweat like they were in a greenhouse. By midday, your socks were soaked. Or worse, you were wearing them barefoot, and the plastic would start sticking to your skin like flypaper. The straps would dig into your ankles. Blisters were basically part of the experience. And the smell? Let us just say it was somewhere between melted plastic and shame. Still, they were a rite of passage, and fashion pain was part of growing up. But if jelly shoes were a questionable fashion choice, The next trend somehow managed to make your middle school photo look like a science fiction movie poster, and not in a good way. They looked like something straight out of a history book. Ruffles, high collars, floral prints, and ankle-length hemlines that screamed 1800s. At first glance, Prairie dresses felt like a costume, too old-fashioned, too modest, too buried in the past. But then something strange happened. Women started wearing them everywhere, not to pretend they were pioneers, but to reclaim softness in a hard world. Prairie dresses were about comfort, freedom, letting your body breathe while still making a statement. In the chaos of disco balls and synthetic fabrics, Prairie dresses brought quiet beauty back into fashion. They reminded people of something simpler, something that felt like home. At first, critics laughed. They called it a step backward. But the ones who wore them knew better. These dresses did not silence women. They gave them room to move, to twirl, to stand in the sun without a care in the world. It was a fashion revival wrapped in lace and nostalgia. The past, updated for the present. People began layering them with denim jackets, wearing them to concerts, picnics, and even protests. They became soft armor in a world that often demanded edges. Prairie dresses were not just about fashion. They were about memory, about honoring roots while still stepping forward. And for a while, they made the world feel just a little more peaceful. The cookie press was a piece of holiday magic that turned dough into art with nothing but a squeeze. With its interchangeable metal discs and ratchet-style handle, it could create dozens of perfect cookies in seconds, each one shaped like a flower, star, or tree. It was especially popular during the holiday season, when kitchens smelled of cinnamon and vanilla, and the radio played old Christmas tunes. The press made baking feel like a celebration. Kids would fight over who got to press the dough, and every batch felt like a tiny miracle. No rolling pin, no cookie cutter. Just one graceful push, and a perfect cookie appeared. The dough was usually soft and buttery, flavored with almond or lemon, and finished with a dusting of sugar or colored sprinkles. The cookie press was about more than efficiency. It was about beauty. It said your cookies could be delicious and delightful, but as store-bought cookies became more common, and as baking turned into a rare weekend chore instead of a family tradition, the press went quiet. It sits in the backs of drawers now, its discs scattered and forgotten. But for those who remember, it was a joy machine. When did we stop making food that felt like play? Television antenna adjustments were part of the evening routine, just like brushing your teeth or fighting over the remote. Before streaming, before digital signals, there were rabbit ears, two shiny rods that stood on top of the television like alien feelers. Getting a clear picture meant twisting them in random directions, adjusting one while the other stayed stubbornly out of reach. Sometimes you needed to stand on one foot. Sometimes the only way to get the signal was to hold the antenna yourself and stay there, frozen, arm extended, human satellite. Someone from the couch would yell, "Right there! Do not move," and you would stay stuck in position, sacrificing comfort for clarity. Foil was added for better reception. Coat hangers became tools of innovation. And if the weather was bad, good luck. The static would return like an uninvited guest. It was frustrating, yes, but it was also communal. Families worked together to solve the mystery of the fuzzy screen. You cheered when the picture came in. You groaned when it disappeared mid-show. Antenna adjustments were the dance of analog television. Awkward, unpredictable, and always a little magical when they actually worked. There are sunglasses, and then there are plastic sunglasses in wild shapes, triangles, stars, lightning bolts, even squiggles. These were not designed for function. They were designed for flair. And in the 1980s, flair was everything. You could barely see out of them. The lenses were tiny. The shapes made no ergonomic sense. But when you slipped them on, you felt like the king or queen of style, until you walked into a wall. These shades were perfect for a costume party, maybe a concert, but not much else. They pinched your temples. They slid off your nose, and God help you if you wore them outside. You would squint harder than a mole in the sun. Still, for kids and teens, they were a badge of honor. They screamed individuality. They screamed rebellion. They also screamed, "I bought these from a vending machine for $1. But we loved them. We matched them with windbreakers and scrunchies and felt like we belonged in a music video. And when we were not wearing ridiculous sunglasses, we were sticking our noses into the weirdest fad of all. Let us talk about the trend that brought scent to everything. Books, stickers, toys, and occasionally, regret. The Wedgewood stove was not just a kitchen appliance, it was the beating heart of the American home for decades. Heavy, reliable, and proud, it stood with cast-iron confidence in countless kitchens from the early 1900s through the 1950s. With gleaming enamel and solid chrome accents, the Wedgewood stove represented stability in a world that was often anything but. It was the kind of machine you could count on through hard winters, power outages, and the leanest of times. When families were short on money but rich in hunger, this stove never flinched. It baked Sunday roasts, stewed apples, and slow-cooked beans with a steady heat that felt almost alive. It came in colors that matched pastel tiles and checkerboard floors, and it was often the first thing people noticed when they walked into a kitchen. Over time, styles changed, kitchens modernized, and stainless steel took over the spotlight. But even now, those who remember a Wedgewood stove in their childhood kitchen remember the smell of cinnamon, the clank of iron, and the soft click of a door that never slammed. It was not smart, it was not sleek, but it was home. Why did we trade something so faithful for appliances that beep, buzz, and break in under 5 years? Shoulder pads were not just a trend, they were a transformation. You could put on a blazer and suddenly feel like a corporate warrior, even if you were just headed to homeroom. The goal was to look powerful, confident, and vaguely like a football player on a job interview. From business suits to casual blouses, shoulder pads invaded every piece of clothing in the 1980s. You could not escape them. They were sewn in, velcroed on, or added as an afterthought to make your silhouette scream important. The bigger the pad, the better. Entire generations walked around with squared-off shoulders and structured poise, looking ready to charge into a boardroom or a runway. Some tried to remove them only to realize the entire shirt deflated without the padding. They were ridiculous, and we knew it. But they worked. You stood a little taller, felt a little braver, and if someone bumped into you in the hallway, your outfit absorbed the blow. Looking back now, they seem comically oversized, but at the time they were armor, fashion armor. And for anyone who wore them, they were a reminder that style was not just about looking good, it was about looking like you meant business. Latch hook kits showed up under Christmas trees and on craft store shelves all across the country. They looked boring at first. A mesh canvas, some yarn, and a weird little hook. But the moment you sat down with one, you got it. This was not just a hobby. It was therapy, disguised as art. You looped. You pulled. You built something from scratch, one tiny tuft at a time. And slowly, the image appeared. Maybe it was a rainbow. Maybe it was a cartoon cat. Maybe it was a psychedelic swirl of nonsense colors that only made sense to you. But it was yours. And it was soft. Latch hook rugs were the 1970s answer to stress balls and fidget toys. They gave your hands something to do while your mind wandered, while the television buzzed in the background, while the world outside felt chaotic and overwhelming. Not everyone appreciated them. Some called them tacky, pointless. But that was never the point. The point was the quiet joy of making something that served no real purpose, except to comfort you. And in a decade full of noise, that comfort meant everything. You knew it was going to be a good school year when your pencil case smelled like a fruit salad. Rubber-scented erasers shaped like food were the peak of academic excitement in the 1980s. They looked like tiny hamburgers, donuts, pickles, even sushi rolls. If you were lucky, your set came with a tiny tray and a fake soda. They were bright, colorful, and smelled like someone spilled a bottle of air freshener in an art supply store. Only problem? They did not actually erase anything. If anything, they left behind more streaks than they removed. Still, no one really used them. You displayed them. You traded them. You clutched them like they were gold. and every now and then, someone tried to eat one just to see what would happen. It was childhood logic at its finest. If it smells like a strawberry milkshake, it must taste like one too, right? Wrong. But what these erasers lacked in function, they made up for in flair. They were tiny scented trophies of your youth. And while they never helped you pass math, they sure looked good on your desk. Speaking of things that looked great on the surface but did not last, let us hit play on a sound that defined a decade and then disappeared overnight. The synthesizer, the drum machine, the shoulder pads. At first glance, they looked more like props from a science fiction movie than actual furniture. Clear acrylic bubbles hanging from chains, suspended in midair like some sort of UFO seating pod. They were weird, alien, and confusing. Why would anyone want to sit in something that looked like it belonged on a space station? But then you sat in one, and everything changed. The bubble chair was not just a seat. It was an experience. The moment you leaned back, it was like the rest of the world disappeared. The plastic shell wrapped around you like a futuristic cocoon. Sound softened. Light bent around your field of vision. And just like that, the chaos of the world melted away. In a noisy 1970s living room with shag carpeting and loud wallpaper, the bubble chair became your quiet place. Your little pocket of peace. Designers hated it. Traditionalists hated it. But kids, teens, dreamers? They fell in love. They spun in it. They read books in it. They drifted off in a trance watching the television hum in the background. And for a trend that people originally laughed at, it stuck around for way longer than anyone expected. Because the bubble chair was not just weird, it was revolutionary. It proved that comfort could come from the most unlikely places. The Philco Predicta television looked like it belonged in a spaceship, not a living room. Its bold design, featuring a separate swivel screen perched atop a futuristic base, turned heads the moment it arrived in 1958. This was not just a television. This was the future. The Predicta came in a range of pastel colors, with names like Holiday and Pedestal. It was slim, sleek, and shockingly modern in a time when televisions still looked like wooden trunks. For the first time, you could turn the screen without moving the entire cabinet. It was clever. It was playful. It made you feel like tomorrow had already arrived. But the beauty came at a price. Technicians hated servicing it. Components wore out quickly. Still, families loved it. They gathered around it, cross-legged on shag rugs, watching black and white broadcasts with wide eyes. It made television magical. Not background noise, not distraction. Magic. But magic is fragile. And soon, newer sets with fewer quirks replaced it. The Predicta faded into memory, too strange for the mainstream, too delicate for time. Now it lives in vintage stores and collectors' basements, quietly glowing with nostalgia. How did the most visionary television of its era become a footnote in history? Mixtapes were handwritten love letters wrapped in cassette cases. You waited by the radio for hours just to hit record at the perfect moment, trying to catch the start of your favorite song without the DJ talking over it. You rewound, replayed, and carefully curated the perfect order so each track melted into the next. Some were made for crushes, others for best friends. Some were sorry tapes, and some were just because. Each one had a theme, a purpose, and a heart behind it. You picked songs that said what you could not. Then you labeled the tape in your best handwriting, maybe decorated the case, and handed it over like it was treasure. Because it was. A great mixtape took hours, sometimes days, to get just right. And when someone gave you one, you listened to it until the tape wore thin and the sound warped. Mixtapes were not just music. They were memories, feelings, time capsules wrapped in magnetic ribbon. And long after the songs faded, you remembered the person who made it, their handwriting, their choices, their message. Even now, in a world of playlists, nothing hits quite like the soft click of a tape deck and a song you once recorded just for someone else. There was nothing quite like the feeling of riding a banana seat bicycle for the first time. The long, curved seat, the high-rise handlebars, the way the bike seemed to stretch out like a lowrider built for kids with dreams of speed and freedom. It looked goofy at first, like it was too much bike and not enough sense. But when you climbed on, you understood immediately. This was not just a bike. It was a ride. The kind of ride that made you feel bigger than you were. Cooler, like you belonged on a summer road with no adults in sight and no plans for the day except maybe a trip to the corner store for some candy. These bikes were built for fun, not function. They turned corners with swagger. They made hills feel like roller coasters. They were the kind of trend that looked strange sitting still but came alive in motion. And even though plenty of grown-ups scoffed and said it was impractical or flashy, they never understood the magic. The banana seat was a throne, a chariot, a symbol of independence when everything else still had training wheels. So before you go, tell us in the comments which 80s fashion fad you rocked or wish you had, then hit like, subscribe, and join us for more blasts from the past you will not want to miss.